Welcome back. So we're working our way through the Rock of a True Foundation. We're up to NazActs Book 3, Chapter 31. The last episode there was a debate going on between Peter and Simon, and it got to be the end of the day, so everyone retired, and so now we're starting with the new day. So it says, "But on the following day, Peter, as usual, rising before dawn, found us already awake and ready to listen, and thus began, I entreat you, my brethren and fellow servants, that if any of you is not able to wake, he should not torment himself through respect to my presence, because such sudden change is difficult. But if for a long time one gradually accustoms himself, that will not be distressing, which comes of use. For we had not all the same training, although in course of time we shall be able to be molded into one habit. For they say that custom holds the place of a second nature. But I call God to witness that I am not offended if anyone is not able to wake, but rather by this, if when anyone sleeps all through the night, he does not in the course of the day fulfill which he omitted in the night. For it is necessary to give heed intently and unceasingly to the study of doctrine, that our mind may be filled with the thought of God only. Because in the mind which is filled with the thought of God, no place will be given to the wicked one." So we got this bottom part here bolded. I felt like it was important to just point out that you want to remain as fixated on God as you can, because these other things in the world are distractions. There's always something going on. Sometimes you have to deal with life, right? So you can't always just focus on God, but you want to try to. You want to try and focus as much as you can. If Satan can't mislead us, he will distract us. If he likes to stir up trouble within your life, and you end up dealing with all these other things when you're not able to focus on the things that matter. And so some of that stuff you cannot avoid, but there's things you can avoid. Like you can avoid being distracted by television shows and current events going on the other side of the world and things like that. It's one thing to know that stuff's going on, but it's another thing to obsess over it or fixate on it. And so sometimes you just have to let some of that stuff go and try and focus on God and do keep in mind the mission that you're here for, and it's not about a lot of these other little side projects and things that are going on in the periphery. It says, "When Peter spoke thus to us, every one of us eagerly assured him that ere now we were awake, being satisfied with short sleep, but that we were afraid to arouse him, because it did not become the disciples to command the master. And yet even this, O Peter, we have almost ventured to take upon ourselves, because our hearts, agitated with longing for your words, drove sleep wholly from our eyes. But again, our affection towards you opposed it, and did not suffer us violently to rouse you." Then Peter says, "Since therefore you assert that you are willingly awake through the desire of hearing, I wish to repeat to you more carefully and to explain in their order the things that were spoken yesterday without arrangement. And this I propose to do throughout these daily disputations, that by night, when privacy of time and place is afforded, I shall unfold in correct order, and by a straight line of explanation, anything that the controversy has not been stated with sufficient fullness." And then he began to point out to us how the yesterday's discussion ought to have been conducted, and how it could not be so conducted on account of the contentiousness of the unskillfulness of his opponent, and how therefore he only made use of assertion and only withdrew only overthrew what was said by his adversary, but did not expound his own doctrines either completely or distinctly. Then, repeating the several matters to us, he discussed them in regular order and with full reason. But when the day began to be light, after prayer, he went out to the crowds and stood in his accustomed place for the discussion, and seeing Simon standing in the middle of the crowd, he saluted the people in his usual way and said to them, I confess that I am grieved with respect to some men who come to us and ask that they may learn, but when we begin to teach them, they mysteriously spring forth as masters and even teachers. And while indeed they ask questions as if ignorant, yet they contradict as if knowledgeable. But perhaps someone will say that he who asks a question asks it in order that he may learn, but when that which he hears does not seem to him to be right, it is necessary that he should answer. And that seems to be contradiction, which is not contradiction, but further inquiry. Let such a one hear this, the teaching of all doctrine has a certain order, and there are some things which must be delivered first, others in the second place, and others in the third. And so all in their order, and if these things be delivered in their order, they become plain. However, if they are brought forward out of order, they will seem to be spoken against reason. And therefore, order is to be observed above all things, if we seek for the purpose of finding what we seek. For he who enters rightly upon the road will observe the second place in due order, and from the second will more easily find the third. And the further he proceeds, so much more will the way of knowledge become open to him, even until he arrives in the city of truth, whither he is bound, and which he desires to reach. But he who is unskillful and knows not the way of inquiry is a traveler in a foreign country, ignorant and wandering. If he will not employ a native of the country as a guide, undoubtedly when he has strayed from the way of truth, shall remain outside the gates of life, so involved in the darkness of black night, shall walk through paths of perdition. Inasmuch therefore as, if those things which are to be sought in an orderly manner, they can most easily be found. But the unskillful man, ignorant of order of inquiry, is right that the ignorant man shall yield to the knowing one, and first learn the way of inquiry, that so at length he may find the method of asking and answering. So there's a lot being said in these two chapters. So what he's speaking about here, we've probably all either witnessed this or experienced this with someone. When you're trying to present truth to someone, they'll set you up with these questions for the purpose of testing you, and at times maybe even looking for ammunition to use against you. There's an experience I had with a group I used to be a member of, who did not appreciate the fact that Yeshua originally taught a vegetarian diet. And as conflicts began to arise, one of the members of this group contacted me and was asking if I believed that eating meat or not eating meat was a salvation issue. And as I've said on here before, if you're asking the question if something is a salvation issue or not, then you're probably not saved yourself, because that is not a proper answer or a proper question for someone to ask if someone is saved. If you are saved, if you are someone who is devoted to God, you just want to please God. You don't need something in it for yourself. And when people start asking, is this a salvation issue, what they're really asking is, do I have to do this? Is this a commandment of God that I can ignore? And the fact that you're looking for commandments of God that you could ignore makes me think that you're probably not saved. I mean, if we're going to use that language, saved or not saved or whatever. So when this person was asking me this, that's what I said. I said, I think the bigger issue is the question itself. Do I have to do this to be saved? Because if you have to ask that question, you're probably not saved. And this person was like, well, I mean, you just some people in the group have been asking if that's what you believe. So now he's denying that it's him that's asking this. Now it's somebody else. And I don't know. I had a bad feeling about this. I could tell that there was something going on. There was an attempt to kind of set me up, right? So I just said, well, I think everything's a salvation issue. I think everything we do, like however you live your life, every interaction you have, every decision you make, I believe the whole thing, like your whole experience, is a salvation issue. And so you want to conduct yourself in the most proper way possible, so that whenever the score is tallied up or whatever at the end, you have a passing mark. So do I think it's specifically a salvation issue? Not that specifically, but I think that everything is. And so he immediately got off the phone. As soon as I said that, he immediately got off the phone. Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. And he like the phone call itself probably didn't last another 10 to 15 seconds. He immediately got off the phone. And then people showed me, I got sent screenshots of him going into this group setting that I was not a member of, and saying that I had told him that not eating meat was a salvation issue and that you were going to hell if you ate meat, which is not what I said. What I said is everything's a salvation issue. So that is one of those examples of someone, when they're asking you questions as if they want to learn, but what they really want is they have ulterior motives, and then they mysteriously spring forth as masters and even teachers. It's kind of the same thing. Like you're being asked questions in a deceitful manner, right? And this is something that you'll see a lot. People want to be able to pull the holier than thou card, right? I mentioned yesterday that you tell somebody that the scriptures have been corrupted, that these wicked priests and scribes and other people have added things to the scripture that shouldn't be in there, and they want to get this holier than thou type of attitude, and you don't think God can preserve his word? As if that's the issue. And again, it's about asking you questions and getting it for an ulterior motive. They're not asking questions because they want to gain knowledge. They're asking it because they want to use what you say against you. Similar thing, I think, as to what's being described here by Peter. So the teaching of all doctrine has a certain order. And so if you're allowed to present information in order, it's much easier to understand. But if you're in a setting like Peter's here, in a debate setting, and he's got an adversary, Simon Magus, there trying to control the order of the debate, it makes it hard to present information. The purpose of a debate is not to convince the other person, it is to convince the audience. And so your adversary does not want to give you the opportunity to convince your audience. And that's why debating can be so difficult. It's because your adversary, whoever that is, will attempt to disrupt the orderly discussion. And that's what you see Simon doing. And if you watch debates very often, you'll see people in the debates doing this sort of thing. Confusing the issue. Creating a straw man, that saying that you're arguing something you're not necessarily arguing. All of this is tactics to interrupt the orderly presentation of information. If they be brought forward out of order, they will seem to be spoken against reason. This is what the adversary wants you to do. And when I say the adversary, I'm not necessarily talking about like Satan. I'm talking about the person who is your adversary in the debate. So when you're seeking truth, I've mentioned numerous times on here that my journey began when I began asking God for certain questions, and I ran across James 1:5, which says, "If any of you lack wisdom, ask, and God is sure to give it to you." So I took this literally. I asked. I made it a formal request, and so God began leading me to various pieces of information. When I read this for the first time in the Nazarene Acts, I was like, it kind of struck a chord with me, because I realized that's really what God had done. He had led me in an orderly manner into various, I would say, phases of information. Like he took me on this journey. And it was through that experience and that process that I was able to gain what little of an understanding I have now. The process is always ongoing. You're always learning more and refining what you know. But the foundation that God laid for me was laid in an orderly manner. And that's the way you have to learn, especially when you're learning something like this, like the true faith that was taught by Yeshua, as opposed to what we're taught in church, because the two are very different. It's not just a matter of learning new information. It's a paradigm shift. You're going from these impure assumptions that you're taught in church, such as the Bible's infallible, such as we're not under law, we're under grace, and all these other like wicked doctrines and impure assumptions and confusing types of theology. You have to let all that go, and you have to come at it from a different angle and realize that the thing that's keeping you from understanding truth is holding on to all these man-made principles that are not even in the Scripture to begin with. But then you also have to realize the Scripture itself is not the end-all, be-all of what your journey is. The journey is to build a relationship with God. The Scripture is there to lead you to God, but it's not there to be your relationship. And that's something that the church has failed miserably at teaching people. People develop a relationship with a book and think that they have a relationship with God. You can search the Scriptures all day, every day, and you're not going to find God in them. You use them as a guide to find Him in the world, in His creation. So the point, first of all, is orderly inquiry and listening to understand, not listening to disagree, not listening so that you can argue your point, but listening to learn. To this Simon replied, "Then truth is not the property of all, but of those only who know the discipline and the order of inquiry, which is absurd. For it cannot be, since He is equally the God of all, that all should not be equally able to know His will." Then Peter said, "All were made equal by Him, and to all He has given equally to be receptive of truth. But that none of those who are born with education, but education is subsequent to birth. No one can doubt. Since, therefore, the birth of men holds equity in this respect, that all are equally capable of receiving discipline, the difference is not in nature, but in education. Who does not know that the things which anyone learns he was ignorant of before he learned them?" Then Simon said, "You say truly." Then Peter said, "If then, in those arts which are in common use, one first learns and then teaches, how much more ought those who profess to be the educators of souls first to learn, and so to teach, that they may not expose themselves to ridicule, if they promise to afford knowledge to others when they themselves are unskillful? Then Simon says, "This is true in respect of those arts which are in common use, but in the word of knowledge, as soon as anyone has heard, he has learned." So this, what's being discussed here, this is one of the reasons that I'm really hard on pastors. And I really am disgusted with them in a lot of ways. Probably more so than I even let be known on here, on my channel. Like I think pastors are lazy. I think they're ignorant as a general rule. I mean, there's exceptions, obviously, but if like, I'm not a pastor. I've never been a pastor. I've never put myself in a position in a congregation where I was claiming to have all the answers. Now, I have been a teacher. I don't like using that word, but I have, presented the information to people. And I took that position seriously, but it was something that other people had placed me there. In other words, I didn't just go out and decide one day, hey, I'm going to pursue a career as a pastor. It was, I started learning things, and then I started sharing the things that I had learned, and then people began coming to me as wanting more information from me, and eventually I ended up starting this channel and just presenting the information I have online, because it's much easier to do so than face to face and constantly repeating yourself. But these men who decide that their career is they want to be a pastor, and they go to seminary or whatever educational system they go to, and they learn, and they don't test the things that they're taught. They don't continue to study after they graduate. They are leading congregations and standing up before people every Sunday and professing that they have the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and that they are making statements about the nature of God and what God's desire is, but they don't have the dedication to read more than one book. They don't have the wherewithal to seek out the information that's like in the Clementine writings. They read one book. They can't be bothered to look anywhere else. They can't be bothered to test what they're teaching. And they spend their whole lives stuck in this box and refusing to do any work to further their knowledge. I think they are disgusting. I think they're I think just false prophets, servants of wickedness, lazy. I really am disgusted by pastors and priests and a lot of these theologians. There's a few exceptions, but they are very few and far between. They have no excuse, is the point. This part that's in bold, at birth, everyone is born ignorant. If I can go out and learn this self as a person who's not even a pastor, like I'm not getting paid, my paycheck does not depend upon me teaching the Word of God or anything like that. I'm just a normal guy who just happened to take an interest in this subject and put a little bit of effort into it. And I was able to learn the things that I've learned and to get to where I am through prayer and study and dedication. And these pulpit parrots can't be bothered to seek anything beyond what they were taught in seminary. I think they're disgusting. I think it's just absolutely, it's unforgivable. There's no reason that the only place you can find this truth is finding people on YouTube. And I'm not the only one. There's other people teaching similar things. Aaron Abke and Cameron Waters and Chris Sartain, and I mean, there's others. There's a handful of us that are teaching this. But meanwhile, these professional pastors, they can't be bothered to study this. They just want to collect a paycheck. And they want to keep you just as ignorant and just as lazy as they are. And it's disgusting. The whole matter, the whole system is just absolutely disgusting. I completely see why God at times gets so fed up with the priests and the pastors. And if you look at the way some of the prophets speak about these, back then it was priests, today it would be the pastors or the scribes, whatever you want to call them. Like, I can understand the disgust and the adversarial attitude that the prophets had toward them, because it's absolutely unforgivable. It's disgusting. So, anyway, that's my soapbox speech for today. Then said Peter, if indeed one hear in orderly and regular manner, he's able to know what is true. However, he who refuses to submit to the rule of a reformed life and a pure conversation, which truly is a proper result of knowledge of the truth, will not confess that he knows what he actually does know. For this is exactly what we see in the case of some who abandon the trades which they have learned from their youth. They change to do something else, and as an apology for this folly of having deserted what they have learned, they devise to speak shame and dishonor about the craft that they have deserted. However, okay, so back up to the bolded part. He who refuses to submit to the rule of a reformed life and a pure conversation, which truly is the proper result of knowledge of the truth, will not confess that he knows what he actually does know. This is another thing I've run into. You explain this to pastors. Like, I had a pastor one time, when I started talking about this stuff, get in his car and run, practically run from me. He said, oh, there's no difference between what Peter and Jesus teach. Or, I'm sorry, Paul and Jesus. And I started just talking about, well, Paul's difference in meat sacrificed to idols versus Jesus's. And that pastor he was practically running for his car. And he got in his car and just took off. Because he did not want an orderly conversation. He picked up on real quick that I knew what I was talking about, and he didn't want to be there for it, because he was not wanting to confess that he knows what he actually knows. You're not going to fool God. A lot of these pastors know they're teaching wrong. They know they are. You're not going to fool God. He knows what you know. Then Simon ought all who hear to believe whatever they hear is true. Then said Peter, whoever hears an orderly statement of the truth cannot by any means dispute it, but knows that what is spoken is true, provided he also is willing to submit to the rules of life. But those who, when they hear, are unwilling to betake themselves to good works, are prevented by the desire of doing evil from acquiescing to those things which they judge to be right. Hence it is manifest that it is in the power of the hearers to choose which of the two they prefer. But if all who hear were to obey, it would be rather a necessity of nature, leading all in one way. For as no one can be persuaded to become shorter or taller, because the force of nature does not permit it, so also, if either all were converted to the truth by a word, or all were not converted, it would be the force of nature which compelled all in the one case, and none in the other, to be converted. So what Peter's saying is that those who hear the truth and they know the truth, they're unwilling to make the changes in their life that the truth necessitates. In the case of that pastor running for his life, when I started talking about the difference between Paul and Jesus, he was unwilling to make the changes in his life. Like, that's the whole reason he was leaving. He was unwilling to betake himself to good works. And he was prevented by the desire of doing evil, from acquiescing to those things which he knew was right. What was the doing evil? The doing evil was he's unwilling to give up his paycheck at the Baptist church he was at, because his paycheck depended upon him preaching the apostate Paul. If that pastor went back to that church and said, "Hey, I just had this conversation with this guy, and he made me see that Paul and Jesus teach two different things," he would lose his job. And the thing is, if you don't have the guts to teach the truth, you shouldn't have taken the job to begin with. His doing evil is being a Baptist pastor. It's evil. It's evil to call yourself a Christian pastor and promote Paul. It's evil. So what was his answer? He did not want to confess that what he knows. He wants to fool God. He wants to think, and a lot of pastors want to do that. They want to fool God. They want to, if we never admit that we know that we're wrong, then we're going to trick God. We're going to fool God into thinking that we were honestly deceived. God's not going to be fooled. Like every one of these pastors, when they stand before him on the day of judgment, they're all going to have, they're all going to learn that their little trick is not going to work. God knows what you know. If you know better, God knows that you know better. The choice is whether you're willing to be converted or not. It's in the power to choose which of the two you prefer. Do you prefer the truth, or do you prefer a lie? But make no mistake, if you choose to obey the lie, you're not fooling God. God knows that you're ignoring the truth. And I'm not, when I say you, I'm obviously not speaking to you personally, more than likely. I don't think many of my listeners fall into the category where that pastor was. I'm just saying, the proverbial you. You as in the person choosing wickedness. You're not fooling anybody. That pastor's not fooling God. God knew the reason that pastor cut a rug getting out of my driveway. He knew. He knew that pastor knew the truth. That pastor didn't want somebody who was articulate about it standing before him and laying out the evidence, because then that destroys his deniability. He wants to be able to deny the truth. Well, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So if you're denying the truth, you're denying him. If you're worshiping in a false paradigm, aka Paul or some other false paradigm, then you've turned your back on him. Because he says that his followers worship him in spirit and truth. So you need to let go of the lies. You need to let go of the comfortable lies. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but this is what you get when I start reading the Nazarene Acts. Like it sparks things in me. It raises up that spirit within me, and it makes me want to share the things that I see that's being said here by Peter. Then said Simon, "Teach us therefore what he who desires to know the truth must first learn." Then Peter, "Before all things it must be inquired what it is possible for man to find out. For it is very necessary, since God is ready to judge the deeds of everyone." God's ready to do what? Judge the deeds. I should change that to works. Judge the works of everyone, that the man who wishes to act might thus easily know what is good or bad. For this reason, I say, a man is not able to find anything as it is, unless he should first be diligent about the matters on which he is to be judged. Diligent. Diligent, to me, means testing what you believe. I think it would also maybe include being willing to read more than one book, pastors. Oh, I can only be bothered to read the Bible. God's not important enough for me to read something else like the Nazarene Acts. God's not that important. I shouldn't read the Gospel of Thomas because that would be more than one book. Laziness. But beyond this, there is no occasion for anyone but a prophet to know. For what is the need for men to know how the world was made? So this should be your priority. Be diligent about the matters on which you will be judged. What will we be judged on? We don't need to know how the world was made. Oh, what happened there? We don't need to know how. I don't know why my mouse is not working. We don't need to know how the world was made. We're not going to be tested on that. You're not going to be tested. You know that's why I mentioned before, in these near-death experiences, you don't have anyone going into the afterlife and being asked by God about doctrine that they believe. You need to lay out your doctrine. Do you believe that, Yeshua was pre-existent? Do you believe this or that? Like all these stupid little doctrines that we all argue about. You're not judged on that. It doesn't matter if you have the correct understanding of whether the Son is equal to the Father, or whether the Son was pre-existent before his birth, or any of this, like all this stuff, like the calendar issues, none of that stuff. You're not going to be tested on any of that. None of that is what you're going to be judged on. You're judged on your works, how you work, not how you believe. This indeed would be necessary to be learned if we had to enter upon a similar construction. So if you had to make a world, maybe then you would need to know how the world was made. But unless you're going to enter upon a similar construction, unless you plan on making a world of your own, you don't need to know that. But now it is sufficient for us, in order to the worship of God, to know that he made the world. But how he made it is no subject of inquiry for us, because, as I've said, it is not incumbent upon us to acquire the knowledge of that art, as though we were about to make something similar. But we will not be judged for why we have not learned how the world was made. However, we will be judged if we are without knowledge of its Creator. For we shall know the Creator of the world is a just and good God, if we seek him in the way of justice. For if we know regarding him that he is good, such knowledge is sufficient for salvation. For in the present life, not only the worthy, but also the unworthy enjoy his goodness and his benefits. But if we believe him to be not only good, but also just, and if, according to what we believe concerning God, we live righteously in the whole course of our life, we shall enjoy his goodness forever. This is what's important. We believe God to be not only good, but also just. And according to what we believe concerning God, we live righteously in the whole course of our lives. We shall enjoy his goodness forever. That is pretty freaking simple right there. In a word to the Hebrews whose opinion concerning God was that he is only good, our Master said that they should seek after his justice. That is, that they should know that he is good indeed in this present time, and that all may live in his goodness, but that he shall be just at the day of judgment, to bestow eternal rewards upon the worthy, from which the unworthy shall be excluded. So this is the whole reason that I made that series of videos on seeking after God's justice, because I really just wanted us to understand what God desires of us. Understand, that all of this stuff that we've turned into religious beliefs, it's not about religious beliefs. It's about loving God and loving your neighbor. That's it. And we need to remember it's in that order too, because one error that I see a lot of people fall into is they put loving your neighbor above loving God, and they compromise the commands of God in order to please their neighbor or to make their neighbor more comfortable. That is not the way you do that. You love God first, most, above all else. You love him first, and then you love your neighbor. But if you're in a conflict to where you have to choose between God or your neighbor, you choose God. So if your neighbor is participating in some type of heinous, sinful behavior, something that maybe the sinful behavior is very politically correct, and God's word is very politically incorrect on that matter, you don't get to just disregard God's command in order to claim that you're just doing it to love your neighbor. Oh, I don't want my neighbor to be upset. I don't want him to feel bad for choosing to be a sodomite or whatever other sexual deviancy they're practicing. Your first priority is to love God, and you love God by keeping his commandments and remaining loyal to him. Then you love your neighbor. But you don't compromise your love for God in order to claim that you are showing love to your neighbor. Usually it's not about loving your neighbor. It's usually about you just not wanting to, and not you specifically, the proverbial you, is usually about wanting to fit in with society and not wanting to stand out as being one of those awful believers in Jesus or God. So we don't have to know why the world is made. That's not a requirement. So if you are basing part of your spiritual identity around what you believe to be the way the world was made, you're kind of wasting your time. It's a waste of time. It's a distraction. By the way, the world is round. If this is one of those examples where people don't want to have an orderly discussion, because I've tried to have orderly discussions with people who believe the world is flat, and they don't want to have that. If you could have an orderly discussion about it, I could tell you how you can personally prove for yourself whether the earth is round or flat. But my experience is the flat earth crowd does not want to do that. They don't want to have an orderly discussion. They want to use emotional arguments and holier than thou type of arguments, and they want to misinterpret plain things that I've said to them, like, hey, if you want to prove the earth is flat or round, this is what you have to do. And they don't want to hear that. They want to argue about it. So I made a couple of videos several years ago, and all I had was a bunch of temper tantrums over it, because I don't believe the propaganda that the earth is freaking flat. Especially when I can go to the beach myself and I can see the curve in the ocean. And I tried to explain that to people, and all they wanted to do was scoff. It's like, okay, you can live in ignorance. I myself have tested the shape of the earth, and I know what it is. But the thing is, it's a waste of time. And the fact that so many people got so emotionally worked up about it, that's exactly the thing that Peter's talking about here. Me, I went and tested it myself one day, and I saw the evidence, and so I know what the shape of the earth is now. So it's not something I have to obsess about. If you want to get mad at me because, you have some religious belief that the earth is flat, I don't care. You're ignorant and you refuse to listen to the truth. So I don't care. And if you want to hear what I had to say on the matter, just go on my YouTube channel and search for the earth is flat, or I don't believe the earth is flat, or something like that. And you'll find that it's a couple of videos I made several years back. It's a distraction. That's it. Then it says, Simon, how can one and the same being be both good and just? Peter answered, because without justice, goodness would be unrighteousness. For it is the part of the good God to bestow his sunshine and rain equally on the just and the unjust. But this would seem to be unjust if he always treated the good and the bad with equal fortune. And were it not that he does for the sake of fruits, which all may equally enjoy who are born in this world, but as the rain was given by God equally nourishes the wheat and the tares, but at the time of the harvest, the wheat is gathered into the barn and the tares are burnt in the fire. So, goodness is just about blessings, and justice is about judgment, right? So how can he be good and also judgment, have justice? And Peter says, because without justice, goodness would be unrighteousness. If you just continue to bestow blessings upon the unrighteous, then you're rewarding the unrighteous and you're being unjust, is what Peter's saying. So for now, God is good to all, but there's a time when the judgment is going to come. Therefore, in the day of judgment, when the righteous shall be introduced into the kingdom of heaven, the unrighteous shall be cast out, then also the justice of God shall be shown. For if he remained forever alike to evil and to good, then this would not only be good, but even unrighteous and unjust, that the righteousness and unrighteousness should be held by him in one order of desert. So, we're already up to chapter 39. So anyway, I think this is a good place to stop. I think we covered a lot of stuff. And look, this video, maybe part of it's a little bit of a test. Are you in the right frame of mind for, service to God? I'm sure, believe me, I'm sure that because I mentioned flat earth, that there's going to be some negative comments on this video, and then there's going to be some probably some thumbs down votes on this video all over that issue, because those people, that group, are unable to have an orderly discussion. It makes them mad if someone teaches the truth about the earth being round. They can't deal with it. They can't have a reasonable discussion. All they do is argue and post pictures that don't even prove the point they're trying to prove. So I'm sure that on this video, there's going to, most of these videos on the Clementine homilies, they're all, 100% thumbs up. I'm sure that there'll be some thumbs down because people get their little feelings hurt about stuff that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you guys that are obsessed about stuff like that, it doesn't matter. You get your panties in a wad every time somebody disagrees with your BS theology on it. So yes, I disagree. I think it's stupid. I think it's a stupid thing to be emotional about. I think it's a stupid thing to obsess about. And I spent, I don't know, I'm not sure how long I've been recording this video. I'm guessing it's probably up to around 40 minutes at this point. Spoke about the flat earth fallacy for 2 minutes, and this is going to be the 2 minutes that people are having meltdowns about, because I dared to mention the truth about the shape of the earth. But it doesn't matter. I wasted 2 minutes talking about it. It was a total waste of time. But there are people who spend hours obsessing about it and watching videos and posting stuff on social media about it, and it's a non-issue. So anyway, I think that's enough for today. Y'all have a good day. Shalom.